have any questions for Rose? All right, Rose, I had one. As always, I have one. All right, so the transport bit actually fascinates me, and the mobility bit, it really catches my fancy. What we saw in the pandemic initially was that when women were being tagged with men, they were fine. But when they were going out alone, that's when the danger started, number one. The other thing that came across was actually young men would not stop, well, they were just unable to be disciplined or behave, or, so that's a function of a lot of things, starting with culture. But as a result of which, now when they would come back home, they brought disease back inside the house. And women who had not left their houses for years and years were now contracting COVID. And a lot of these young women doctors were saying, well, how are these people admitted, right? How are they hospitalized? This woman has not left her house in 5 months. I'm wondering whether that kind of experience also existed in Africa. Or is it very South Asian, this phenomenon?
Are you talking about in all socioeconomic groups, or specifically who are you referring to? Because when we speak about the vast majority in Kenya, whether you talk about men or women, they're very, very resigned. They're just kind of like, it's not our problem, you meet them and they'll say, it's you people who access hospitals who have a problem. We don't have a problem. We die every day. Nobody cares. You don't care. It's not our problem. So in terms of epidemiology, I don't know that we are tracking it super well. It's one of the things that I would like to investigate if I could. There are a lot of unqualified deaths. Whether it's more or less, we don't know, because it's happening to people who are traditionally marginalized and in places that are traditionally marginalized, where we don't have those kind of records. And you'll see a record that just says heart attack, died of heart attack, and heart arrest, very, very generalized things. So, I mean, I think in terms of epidemiology, I can't really give you data, as it were. We rely very... Sorry, go ahead.
You've actually captured what I was asking. In terms of the citizen subject, in terms of how people are responding, in terms of a new social setting that has kind of emerged. It's no longer the same, right? So the resignation is greater, the disappointments are greater, the sexism is greater, the misogyny is greater. I mean, in that, there's also a process of re-education, which is also happening, but it's compared to the demon of misogyny and sexism, it's very, very small. It's very little. So thank you. Thank you so much, actually. I've learned a lot from you.
Thank you.
All right. Do we still have Khalid Saab with us? Oh, Sarah had a question. Sarah has a question. Sorry, Sarah, go on.
Yes, I do have a question. Yeah, Rose, it's good to meet you again here. I just have a question. You said something very interesting, that women don't want to lose what COVID has given them. Is there a report? And I mean, I can understand that myself, having now working from home for so long. Is there a report that you can point us to that captures some of these observations, or is there a survey or research report?
Unfortunately, no. I'm speaking from my own reporting as a journalist. I actually did an article on it in which I interviewed media women. It was very interesting to hear that it's not all bust. So they're complaining about the struggles that they go through. They complain about actually the difficulties of working at home and managing children, but they don't want to give it up, because it brings it's a new experience. And women are realizing what they give up when they go to the workplace, and realizing there's actually an opportunity to create a different reality for the newsroom going forward. So it's just my own article, which I can share with you.
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Right. Khalid Saab is next before we move on to Cassette and Krishanti. Khalid Saab, welcome. Thank you for being with us at very short notice. In terms of UN Women, we've had these number of superstars telling us what has actually been the case. What have you guys at the UN, what have you been receiving? And how do you read the situation? Whether, do you feel that societies have taken a step back, have gone backwards, have they regressed? Or do you feel that there are certain seeds that might bloom in future?
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you so much. First of all, greetings from Islamabad, and my very warm regards to Shirihat. I was the one who received first my gender, state obligation, and CEDAW training from her in 1998. I still remember. So she is one of the mentors I have, and I was very happy that seeing her on that forum. And I have learned a lot from her over the years. Same is the case with Tasneem. She has been very close ally in the women's movement in Pakistan, because whole of my career is about women's rights from last more than 25 years after leaving the government. Very pertinent. I will not repeat many things because much has been said. Definitely we are losing ground. And as UN Women has declared, in pandemic, it is a shadow pandemic, which we are facing. And the double burden of women is now multiplied by multitude of that burden. You cannot assess what we have seen in the field, how the things are moving. And I will give you some of the examples from Pakistan specifically, where I have been pursuing these things. One alarming situation for not Pakistan, but whole of South Asia specifically, which I always say is a South Asian syndrome, is that development and women's concerns have never been a story for newspapers. And now the electronic media, whether these are the radios or the television channels. Because that is a kind of a one story, as your report has already mentioned, that sensational kind of a thing which they can sell. They pick and they move ahead and then they leave. There is no consistency of reporting on women's concerns and women's issues, the sufferings they are having, and there has been no follow-ups of the stories at all, specifically in South Asia and Pakistan. So that has been a concern. And also what I have seen is that over the years, after whatever we gained in Pakistan, we are losing it, as I have already said. And that is some because of this pandemic, and much because of the policies of the regimes we are having around us within this country and in other countries, as has been already said in some of the countries, what they are doing and what kind of policies and the laws they are coming up to curb the right to information and and many things. So that has been one of the concerns as well. But going forward, we have seen that women have lost many jobs during this, not only because of pandemic, but because of the policies and the financial issues the media houses are facing around the globe. And the first cut is always, it begins from women. And that's what we have seen. But at the same time, what we have seen here in Pakistan, and this is purely my personal opinion, that we are losing the strong voices on gender in media. And that has happened drastically. One is definitely the generation, because I feel that after one generation there is a big gap, and now we are seeing some youngsters coming. So in the middle level there is a vacuum, and that is the vacuum where now the management is coming on board, and the reporting of any case. If you look the medium, as well as if you look at the editorial control of the media, you will find that while reporting, a reporter with a microphone and a camera is standing on a place, and he is creating an imaginative kind of a story to show that this could have been happened like this. So that there are no norms we have seen in recent days. Specifically, if I refer to the case of motorway rape recently, which happened in Pakistan, if you look at the reporting of that, so it is not only the numbers reported, but the way they are reporting and the quality of their reporting and the language they are using, and then how they are misleading the community by reinforcing the stereotypes that what has happened is because of women themselves. And then the same is the mindset of the political leadership, and then the same is the bureaucracy or the government officials, functionaries, the duty bearers are doing the same. So that has been one of the issues. And along with that, what I have seen and I can say is that there is no research-based, evidence-based reporting on certain things. It's very generic, which they come up. There are very few newspapers. For example, in Pakistan, you have mentioned already the Dawn, and you may name some of the others which come up. There is a lot available around you. For example, I will quote three studies recently done in Pakistan. One is the Rural Women Report, the status of rural women. One is the costing study on the child marriages, which is of first of its kind in Pakistan, and that has shown alarming situation. But there has been no analysis, no follow-ups, no reports, other than the launching ceremony, and that is again the speech of the person who was invited there. Not the detailed analysis that what are the findings, what has happened. For example, I will quote that in Punjab, one of the biggest, largest province of Pakistan, the study states that 20%, 27% are the child marriages. So it's a huge number, and the cost they have calculated is about 4.75 million US dollars per annum to the economy of the GDP. So that's what, but that has not become a story. So these are the crucial things which we need to come up with to do something and to take some actions at the civil society level. UN Women engages with civil society. We feel that civil society is one of the most important partners in development with UN Women, and we believe in that. And here in Pakistan, I can say that how we are moving and doing that. But over and above one important thing, that if we look at 137 countries across globe who have actually task forces for COVID, only 8 have out of 137 gender parity. And the total number because of these 8 then is about 24%. Women are represented in those. And in Pakistan, you may know, the national task force which is working is having no women at all. So, but on the other hand, what women are doing in health sector, in policing during the pandemic, we have seen very excellent examples in Pakistan, specifically in Islamabad and Rawalpindi, that how women police officers take an initiative, and they have come up with a very innovative models of policing and addressing the gender-based violence and the issues for reporting. They have created such kind of reporting desks without the support of their superiors and without any budgetary allocations, because those were women and they wanted to do something. The same has been the case with the ministries, but media has not picked up that as an example or a change agent people to show that there are champions who want to do something in this crisis situation. So that kind of a things I can mention, but there is another alarming thing is about the care work women are doing. So due to lockdowns, what has happened? So many things have been already said: informal economy, home-based workers issues. But these are the missing stories. But one alarming thing which we feel here in Pakistan as well is the cyber harassment, because the digital spaces have much more as compared to the past. And during 2020, according to one of the helplines which is supported by UN Women in Pakistan on cyber harassment help, it begins with January 2020 from 100 cases per month. And in July, it went to 700 cases per month. So that was the rapid increase in cyber crimes, but that has not become a story. And even there are many cases. If I correlate this with another study undertaken by a renowned organization in Pakistan, or a foundation working for women, it states that there are in 25 districts of Pakistan during 2020 reported 114 suicide cases. And there are some media reports, and one very alarming case I came across few weeks back in Karachi, that a woman committed suicide because of cyber harassment and the blackmailing. She sent, before committing suicide, she sent a voice message to a friend, but then there was a time from sending a message, receiving a message, and then committing a suicide. But where was the response time? What the friend did, whether she called to the police, because we have emergency police helplines, and sometimes they respond, but not every time. But if they respond, whether there was any response time. So the response services, on the other hand, are not actually responding to the victims, to the survivors of violence. But definitely domestic violence, sexual assault, sexual harassment, harassment at workplace, these are the issues which are not coming into media, along with the cyber harassment cases. And one more thing which I want to say here is that there are tendencies here which we have seen, that very minimal, at very minimal level, the people specifically take up the issues within economy, within budget, which are actually of women's issues. So the political elite itself, and in Pakistan specifically, if I say the present government, uh, exactly from the start of this pandemic, their attitude have been a very casual. And one major thing which struck here in media, the political leaders said it, so many other people, lives or livelihood. So rather than looking at what is happening to the human being, what is happening to the families, and ultimately the sufferers are women and children. So, but there was one thing: lives or livelihoods. So they denied, and the situation and the mental denial and a kind of steps they have taken is the reversal of the gains of women's movement. So that has been alarming in these situations. So we feel that we need to take collective actions. We need to think of beyond borders, and we have to be one for these situations. Situation we are feeling in South Asian countries, and we are facing the vaccination processes, the availability of vaccination, and then the denial from the people for vaccine to be vaccinated. So these are the issues which are emerging for future as well. So this is where we are standing, and we feel that it's a shadow pandemic, the violence against women and girls, the gender-based violence, and it has actually impacted a lot negatively, and even it has drived away many gains we had over the years after struggling to gain it. And then there is a problem of implementation of policies we have seen. The policies, the reforms they want to do, they announce it, but they don't implement it. And these are not supported with budgetary allocations as well. So the mere policy cannot do anything. So these are things, and I will not take much more time because it's already much late. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Khalid Saab. This is actually a perfect segue into what Cassette wanted to talk about, which was, I believe, global policies and how people are responding to that. Cassette, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you so very much. Actually, there are two things that I want to focus on in the interest of time. Is one, first I would like to, my short preface is that the Center for Women's Global Leadership at Rutgers University in the United States has been working on and off with ACTS and Tasmin in particular since 2018, when we started our gender-based violence journalism initiative. And what we did was to convene regional consultations with women journalists on the issue of how best to identify the needs of journalists reporting on gender-based violence and what kind of resources still need to be developed. And I have to say that we, over this past 2 or 3 years, we have greatly admired the work of ACTS, and we are extremely happy to be partnering with them on this launch. And I would want to refocus briefly on the importance of the report that is just being launched, because it is a huge contribution. And I think that actually the Tasneem's preface should really be included in future textbooks and memorized by everyone studying journalism. And I'm not exaggerating, Tasneem, I really mean it. So the main point that Tasneem is making in her preface, which is really the slogan also of the Center for Women's Global Leadership, is that the pandemic is a gendered crisis. But what do we mean when we say that, right? So we know that the worldwide increase of gender-based violence since the beginning of the pandemic has been to some extent, the increase of it. But this does not necessarily mean that the overall gendered impact of the crisis, including its management and all the policies that have come up, has been adequately recognized or even worse, prioritized. We need to fight, I think, the perception that gender-based violence has reached a crisis level because of COVID. In our view, gender-based violence has always been a crisis. And the pandemic has, however, exacerbated its manifestations for sure, and rendered some of them more visible. In terms of the situation in the US, I think that the gender impact of the pandemic here in the US media has received a very uneven coverage, both in scope and in depth. And one main issue that I want to mention, and I'm sorry if I repeat something that has been said earlier, is really the lack of disaggregated data, which ACTS report is really emphasizing. And both just to add a number to this, according to UN Women, as of the middle of last year, only 37% of cases, of COVID cases, have been disaggregated by sex or by age. So this means that we have really globally, and certainly in this country, very little to go from. In the US, one other data issue is the lack of disaggregated data by race. And this is really a priority in this country. I want to refer to a study that just came out by the Journal of General Internal Medicine, which says Black women in the United States are dying from COVID-19 at a higher rate than every other demographic group except Black men. And Black women are overrepresented in nursing assistant and home health and roles, meaning that they have been dying in greater numbers. And the Boston Globe here in the US was, I believe, the only major newspaper that covered this study. And this is actually a problem that we have here also, which is that there is a discrepancy between a large number of incredible studies coming out on the pandemic, but it does not translate into necessarily any qualitative coverage of those studies. Here in the US, I mean, women are at risk for many of the reasons that one could expect, such as the nature of their employment, meaning, of course, healthcare and frontline workers. Just to be more specific, in the US, women hold 76% of all healthcare jobs. So that gives you an idea of the increased risks. But the problem is, of course, also, as I've been mentioned, the loss of employment. Since we have here, for instance, over 2 million domestic workers, who many of them lost their job, obviously. Housekeepers working in offices and hotels in the tourism industry, service workers, clerical workers, small business owners, you name it. And many of those women are losing their jobs to men who are deemed to be much more dependable. Among other reasons why is transportation issues, meaning that the majority, I mean, not the majority, but many more women rely on public transportation to go to work. Therefore, many businesses have deemed that they wouldn't be reliable. The impact of school closures has been huge in terms of the childcare and homeschooling responsibility that women are are deemed responsible for. The caregiving for sick family members, the providing food for the family, healthcare access, etc. But there are two particular impact examples that I want to give that are receiving very little media coverage, which is the situation of single mothers, head of households. 15 million families in the US are families with a single mother as the head of the household. And 20% actually of households are headed by women in the state where we have the highest percentage of them. So that's a huge proportion of the population that is being affected. In terms of the victims of domestic violence, which is also a very a somewhat much more visible issue here in the US, but in terms in particular of increased risks, lack of access to services, all the challenges for women to report the abuse that they suffered from, obtaining legal help, etc. But I would say what has been reported is mostly the quantitative increase of instances of domestic violence, and we are flooded with such statistics. But what is not reported is, or only very occasionally, is the intensified forms of such violence. And whether it is that the beatings can lead up to murders, whether it is the length and the scope of the harassment. Regarding the domestic violence, I would say another media coverage issue is, I think, the tendency to blur the boundaries between explaining, meaning, for instance, what is the impact of lockdown, and justifications. For example, we see in the media a lot of narratives about the frustrations of perpetrators due to job loss, the fact that the division of labor is different in the homes, etc. So it's not necessarily that the journalist, of course, mean to justify the action of the perpetrators, but it's definitely the kind of underlying message in many instances of reporting. I think that a very important thing, again, coming back to Tasmin's preface, that she says is that the media's performance, she said, as is applied to Pakistan, in terms of its duty to educate and to inform the public about how the COVID crisis is gendered, has been subpar. And I would say it certainly is not unique to Pakistan, and it certainly applies to the US. And this brings me back to another important lesson in the, focus of UC's report, which is what are really the key missing stories. And I think that's where example can vary much more from country to country. But in terms of, again, the US context, I would say the missing stories are stories about the long-term impact of the pandemic and the policies that deal with it. And particularly as it pertains to women's mental health, which the loss of income, the lack of access to decision-making processes. Again, there are studies about this, but very little translates into media coverage. And certainly the issue of women's mental health, I think, will be or should be one of the next key focus of our media coverage. Other examples of women who are deeply affected, directly or not, by the management of the pandemic and that are getting zero coverage are asylum seekers. As you know, we have a huge numbers of them in the US, but many of them have been sort of, quote, locked up in Mexico because of the border being closed. So these women many of them are fleeing gender-based violence in their respective countries, and they have no access to the US. The situation also of homeless women has been completely neglected. The plight of indigenous women, and I want to give a very interesting example here of one of the, traditionally in many of the US Native American communities, women, and especially elder women, who are particularly at risk, of course, of the COVID, are the keepers of the language of their respective tribes. And we have hundreds of them in the US. And interestingly enough, one of those tribes recently, when the vaccination became available, decided to prioritize elderly women because if they did not survive the pandemic, their languages would die. And the death of languages, of native languages in the US is probably one of the most underreported issues that you can think of. And just a more, two quick observations on this topic. I want to say very briefly about the use of the word pandemic, that we've seen a lot in the media about the pandemic, about gender-based violence being called the other pandemic, the silent pandemic, the shadow pandemic. And I think that why, regardless of which adjective we choose, I think the importance of using, really, of claiming the word pandemic here when we talk about gender-based violence is because exposure to violence generates more violence. So it is indeed like a disease to some extent. Again, exposure to violence generates more violence, and we all have to stress this. My other observation would be that many media narratives use the, quote, new normal terminology, and GBV cannot be included in the list of inescapable or understandable unintended consequences of the need to control the pandemic at all costs. And just as worrisome for me is the use of the terminology, the return to normalcy when the COVID quote disappears. This terminology implies that we will go back to accepting an ill-defined and inadmissible level of violence, which of course we cannot accept. I will, let's see if there was anything else I wanted to mention. Oh, just to pick up on something that was just said about the example of this woman who committed suicide. Brings up to me a perfect example of what happened this week in the US, which is that CNN, but CNN Global actually, decided to do a piece or series, I'm not sure, called "The Other Pandemic, the Suicide Rate of Men." So apparently there is indeed worldwide and in many countries an increase in the number of men who are committing suicide since the beginning of the pandemic. So which I'm sure that this is a very valid issue for sure. But again, this is where I think we all need to be extremely vigilant, which is that we are beginning to see a number of narratives in the media identifying a whole series of, quote, new pandemics. And I am very concerned that the light is not going to shine anymore on gender-based violence. So my main conclusion here is, again, thank you so much to Axe and to Tasneem and Ahmed for launching this incredible report. And I do hope that the rest of the world will pay attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, Ahmed, are you there? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. I was just thanking Cosette, and I was saying that please keep these comments coming because, you know, mentors, what they say, it means a lot. So please keep this coming. Krishanti, welcome, and finally we get to meet. Thank you for waiting so long. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. I'm going to make my comments really brief and really summarize, because this has been an extraordinarily rich discussion, so I have very little to add. I want to start by congratulating the Axe team, because what you have done is bold and honest, and two things that don't happen often enough in the world, not just in Pakistan. So thank you for that. And we are deeply honored to partner with you on this. A quick snapshot of the Center for Women's Global Leadership. And I want to say that movements are born out of exclusion. And Center for Women's Global Leadership was created to address the exclusion of women from the human rights arena 30 years ago at the United Nations. So it's only been 28 years since the UN formally recognized and integrated that women's rights are human rights into the human rights mechanisms. We were fortunate to spearhead this work with sisters from other regions. And one of the main things that you might identify us with or would recognize as our work is the initiation and now the global coordination of the global 16 days campaign to end gender-based violence. We are proud to have started it with a group of women predominantly from the global South, and coordinate it in its 30th year this year. And this partnership with Axe, as well as our work around bringing women journalists in to really shifting the discourse on how the media reports on violence, is a result of the work of the 16 days campaign in roughly about 180 countries. So what I heard I mean, at this moment in this conversation of the last almost 3 hours is that, you know, COVID-19, the pandemic has amplified all that we know too well. The structural discrimination coupled with the social and cultural constructs continue to exclude one half of humanity and as having less value, and therefore we are disposable at different moments in different times. And at the intersection of other identities, this could be pretty drastic for some women. No country treats its women as well as its men because legal, economic, political, educational structures, including how cities and towns are built, are all about what men need and keeping men in mind. So the report of ARCS, that is so bold, provides evidence to this, and Pakistan is no exception. Over 90 countries in the world have discriminatory laws that violate the fundamental rights of women. We are in the 21st century. So if those in power and those who make decisions in the world and at the highest level in governments do not include women as full and equal participants in society, they are less smart and broken than we originally thought possible. And we have to recognize that addressing this particular pandemic requires us to seek solutions that are outside the box and beyond borders, and we heard that before. There is a staggering number of deaths caused by COVID, and we have heard that there are more men dying compared to women. However, the disproportionate amount of the burden of this virus is carried by women. Globally, women make up over 70% of healthcare, including care work. 98% of the caretakers are women, right? 48% of the paid workforce are women, and now doing double and triple duty. As you already know, this has been the conversation today, that the pandemic has increased the level of violence, the gender-based violence against women, and women are facing violence at home at an unprecedented level, making home the most dangerous place for women right now. So if you look at the global numbers, 1.3 billion of us women face violence across the globe. And I think this number is is conservative. And 66,000 of women are violently killed annually. This is femicide. They are killed for being women by men who are related to them, most oftenly, as husbands, fathers, brothers, uncles, and acquaintances. That's roughly about 180 a day, right? These are only the recorded homicides. And we heard earlier, when women are raped, they commit suicide, that is not considered as a part of this way of counting women who are being killed, right? And again, we have to recognize these are only the reported cases, and it's a very conservative number. In the US, in an informal survey in a well-off school district, grade 7 onwards, every girl has reported that she has been approached by a boy who has requested her for nude pictures. Now, if you take this number, that is sexual harassment that compromises a girl's ability to thrive and enjoy her inherent right to dignity. Okay, so which means that by the time a girl is 12 years old, right, she's already faced sexual harassment. And this is pretty much 100%. Just like the coronavirus, gender-based violence transcends borders, religion, culture, class, caste, and all other identities, spans across geographies, disrupts social, economic, political systems, destroy communities and nations, if we paid attention to it. And therefore, to us, gender-based violence is not a shadow pandemic, but it has to be recognized and addressed as a pandemic. I think that is very critical for us to keep in mind. And I want to kind of connect us to the number I gave you about the 66,000 women killed annually, and this number during COVID has gone up. We still don't have the accurate data and the disaggregated data yet, but the anecdotal evidence that we are getting from countries from organizations who are working on the 16 days campaign is horrendous. We have, again, I think there's a massive gap in the reporting, because most often when we talk about violence, it's sensationalized, as brought up before, and it is not connected to systemic nature of discrimination, right, of women and the devaluation of women. And we have to really recognize that violence is an indicator of that discrimination and exclusion. So going back to the femicide number this year, at the 30th anniversary of the 16 days campaign, the campaign will focus on femicide. The Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women has requested and recommended that each country set up a femicide observatory, so we would have accurate data that will provide the necessary evidence to help shift this trend of killing women because men can. We really believe that a world without violence is possible. The world has all the resources it needs to eliminate gender-based violence. What we need is the political will. And journalists really have a key role to play in ensuring that we reach this goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I'm blown away by so many things that I've learned today. I'm much younger than many of you. I've grown up listening to you, reading you, just learning from things that you've written. It has been a huge pleasure and a huge privilege to be here asking you questions in person. I'd like to thank everyone. Tasneem, do you want to say last word and a concluding note?
I would of course like to thank everybody who's been here on the panel. A lot of them have already left, but thank Shiri. I mean, despite your not being well, you have been here, and I know it's almost 1 hour. Bangladesh is 1 hour ahead of us, so it's quite late in your part of the world. But thank you so much, everybody, and a special thanks to Cosette and Kshanti for your continued trust and faith in us and your encouragement, which kept us going. And I think you very rightly put that we are very bold and very honest, and that is why we are not much liked by many people, including donors. Let me be very, very honest. So, and we don't mind it actually. We like the work that we are very passionate about our work. So, I mean, this whole report was possible only, because we were passionate about it. I mean, we had no money, but we had the passion to keep us going. But thank you so much for being there for us, Krishanti and Cosette, and for your encouragement, for your support. And thank you everybody for your, contribution to this debate. I was about to message Ahmed that I'm getting disease spills, and I think I'll just take off because I am still not 100% recovered from my COVID thing. But I am really very happy, pleased, honored. It's been a pleasure listening to everybody. And hopefully we'll be able to put together everything and also share a video with you, which Emma that especially prepared for, but we forgot it in all the excitement of listening to so many speakers that I think he lost track of the video thing. And he said he's going to email it to everybody. So do view the video and give us a comment. And thank you again. Yeah, Emma, you can just formally conclude now.
Thank you so much. We've loved having each and every one of you. Thank you, Cosette. Thank you, Kshanti, for being my new teachers in life, and for being, and for being who you are, really. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Shiri. Thank you, Froja. Thank you, Halsab. It has been a pleasure having all of you, learning from all of you, learning from your experiences, and adding to what to certain strands of thoughts that I think were incomplete for us in Pakistan. You've helped us complete those strands of thought as well, learning from your experiences. So thank you so much. We will send you the videos, we will send you the links as well. Enjoy the video as well, enjoy the links as well. We will also have your sound bites out on social media in a couple of days. So there'll be that as well. Hopefully more people can learn from what has been discussed here. This session has actually taken me back to grad school, where every class used to be this enriching experience. Thank you so much for enriching us in these ways, and look forward to another event very soon.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Tasneem.